It was once a meaningless bayou, but that area later became the lifeblood of our area, pumping money and jobs into the local economy. The Houston Ship Channel is celebrating its 100th birthday this year. It's the subject of a book titled Sheer Will, the story of the Port of Houston and the Houston Ship Channel. And here with an overview is author David Falloure. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate we're talking off camera. You know, it's easy for people to just sort of forget that the port's even there. You know, so much of us live over on the west side of town. Maybe you see a ship or two, maybe you drive over it, but you don't really think about it. But you're saying we should think about it.
Absolutely. The Port of Houston is the reason why Houston is the city it is today. And in fact, when the Allen brothers chose this site, they chose it because they wanted to create a port to the open sea. And they thought that where Houston is placed right now, South Main, at the confluence of Buffalo Bayou and White Oak Bayou, was the head of navigation. So they wanted to bring goods, people, all from the Gulf of Mexico straight up into Houston.
And the port coming online at the same time as the Panama Canal?
That's the Houston Ship Channel.
The Houston Ship Channel, right.
The Port of Houston actually began before the city of Houston even was here, but it wasn't called the Port of Houston, of course. But the Houston Ship Channel began at the same time as the Panama Canal. So that's really the centennial that we're celebrating this year, is the completion of that effort.
And sheer will, is that really what it took to make this thing a reality? I mean, you can imagine 100 years ago what things were like. Force of will was the driving factor.
Completely. No one wanted to put a port in Houston. They thought it was nuts to have a port 50 miles inland. And Congress wasn't entirely sure they wanted to spend the money. So Houstonians, this was a generations-long fight. There were constantly efforts to dredge a canal from Houston all the way out to the Gulf of Mexico. There were various things that stopped it. There was war, there were depressions, whatnot. But finally what happened is Houstonians went to Congress and said, we need to do this. And Congress said, yeah, okay, you're probably right. This is probably a good idea. But we don't want to pay for the whole thing. So Houstonians said, okay, I tell you what, we'll split the cost with you. And that's actually the very first time that a local project had a local payment component to a federal project.
Wow.
So we actually set the stage for that for the rest of the country, and from history on, how federal projects are done locally. So that was the case there. And in fact, that's where Jesse Jones comes into this picture. He is one of the fathers of the Houston Ship Channel. The banks didn't want to carry the bonds to fund our part of this. So the mayor at the time said, Jesse, what are we going to do about this? And he said, give me 24 hours. In 24 hours, Jesse Jones met with all the bank owners in the city of Houston. And at the end of that time, all but one bank carried the bonds.
Wow, that's fantastic. Is this Jones Hall, Jesse Jones of Jones Hall, or is that a different Jones?
Jesse Jones of Jones Hall, Jesse H. Jones. He was a huge factor in the port story.
Is it his will, you think? That part of the sheer will? Is it just a lot of people?
Let's take the case of a guy named Eber Cave. He was a big proponent of the port. And this was about 1897, and Congress was coming down to check out the Buffalo Bayou, whether or not this was really worth it, right? The problem is 1896 was a drought, so there was no water in Buffalo Bayou. And in true luck fashion, a blue norther came in February, flooded the Buffalo Bayou, and they go out on a boat, and one of the guys is calling off depths, but it's not deep enough. So Eber Cave grabs the line, and he's got the congressional representatives behind him, and he's calling off exaggerated depths to this thing.
We're going to have to get more in the book, okay? Thanks for joining us. We've run out of time. David Falloure, it sounds like a fascinating story. Sheer will, the story of the Houston Bayou, the Ship Channel. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate the port. Thanks a lot. Not a problem. All right, LeBron's heading north. Chris is staying put. What does all this mean for the Rockets? Details next in sports.